What's up everyone, this is Feridun, the co-founder of Swish Swoosh. Welcome back to the Swish Swoosh in Tune series. Have you ever wondered what it's like to orchestrate for blockbuster films like Jurassic World, Inside Out and Star Trek? Today we are diving into the world of orchestration and film composition with Dr. Norman Ludwin, a true legend in the industry. In this episode we'll explore Norman's journey, the evolution of orchestration in the digital age, and his advice for aspiring composers. Prepare yourself for a conversation filled with expert insights and stories from the heart of Hollywood. Hi everyone, today my guest is a real legend. He's a good friend of mine, Norman Ludwin. Thanks, Norman, for coming.
My pleasure.
I want to introduce you first. You are an orchestrator, a lecturer, author, a double bass player, composer. And did I miss anything? I don't know. There are a lot. So you worked as an orchestrator and a performer in over 200 Hollywood movies and TV series like Home Alone 2, Coco, Star Trek, Up, Lost, lots of my favorites. Can you briefly introduce yourself if you can do it?
Well, I'd be glad to. And merhaba to you again. And thank you for asking me to do this. I come from a bit of a musical family. My father played piano, so I always had music in the house. And I started with a little piano. Then I picked up the bass very early when I was maybe 9, so quite young. So I played music all through my young years, high school years. Mostly interested in jazz, but I got more serious when I went to college. I never thought I would do it classical music, really. I never thought that I would be able to have a career just as a bass player, but I worked hard like other people did. When I came back to Los Angeles, I traveled. I got very lucky to get involved in the studios. For most of my life, I played the bass, upright bass, in the studios. I also play electric bass, but very rarely would I ever be called upon to do that in the studios. There's just too many wonderful players on electric bass who can do everything. So I concentrated on the bass and doing session music, as you mentioned, during this time in Los Angeles. We're talking the 80s, 90s, 2000s. There was a tremendous amount of movies, films, TV shows, records, CDs, whatnot. We also used to do a lot of what we call jingles. I was always interested in composing. I decided to go back to school. When I was older, I was about 50 years old. The work was slowing down. So I went back to school and I got my master's and a doctorate in composition. The ironic thing was just about that time, which we're talking about, let's say 1997, was just about the time, no, I'm sorry, more like about 2004, something like that, 20 years ago. Michael Giacchino came to Los Angeles, and I got connected with Michael. And all of a sudden, there was a renaissance of recording work. Work had been slowing down because of production overseas, but all of a sudden, Michael came to town, and he wanted to use orchestras. And so I became part of his bass section. And Michael's run, as you know, and as your listeners know, has been extraordinary. He started with video games. First thing he did was video game in Seattle, A Lost World. And then came back to Los Angeles, started doing TV shows. J.J. Abrams, of course, we know Lost. This started his relationship with Abrams, and Abrams started to become an A-list director. Michael had this huge trajectory, and he took me along as a bass player. But I was also always interested in composition. I didn't really think what orchestration was as a job. I started thinking more about it as I was going to school, and I started doing some teaching at UCLA, and I started teaching orchestration. So my interest in being a professional orchestrator, or somebody who takes other people's music and orchestrates it for them, increased. After a long time, several years of discussions in a way with Michael, finally he gave me a chance, really. And then I became part of his team as an orchestrator for several years, and some other people like Chris Young and some other big names in Hollywood and other, lesser names. So that's basically the nutshell in terms of double bass and orchestration world.
It sounds really cool, cool career. I want to start with your books actually, because I met you with the help of your books. I personally, I didn't study music composition or orchestration, but with a basic knowledge of music harmony, it was very easy to follow your books. And as far as I know, you have published 12 books, right?
I think it may be 13 now with a new book that is just being published by the Italian publisher Curci, Edition
Okay.
Curci.
So I want to ask you, how did you achieve to simplify this challenging field in your books?
Oh, wow. Well, I started teaching, like I said to you. Initially, I used the Adler book and the Keenan book, the regular books that were in the regular syllabus, I guess, or literature. But I always had my own ideas about how I wanted to simplify things. I think the answer is that my background, having played in an orchestras really for 50 years, really for a long time, and being in the studios as well and watching what was going on, I just developed some ideas about better ways to teach things. I guess is really the answer. I came up with concepts that I thought of ways to sort of simplify issues and make it very practical. So I started with giving material to my students, analyses to my students. And after a while, I had so much material that I said to myself that I might as well combine it in sort of a book form. It really came from, I guess, my own experience of learning orchestration and composition myself and being in school and seeing how it's taught in school and maybe trying to find ways that I thought were a little clearer.
The innovation starts with what we are facing in life. You wear many hats, like you're an orchestrator, lecturer, and you're a performer, author. And how do you manage to excel your energy and your schedule into those fields? How do you separate?
It's difficult, right? It's difficult. Life is a little bit easier now. Of course, when I have a daughter, when my daughter was growing up, I was very busy with work, working all the time as a player. It was more difficult, and going to school as well. I'm very good at separating things out for myself in my mind in terms of things that I have to do. I have a very good idea at this point of how much time something will take me to do. Like if I have to grade a paper, or if I have to do an orchestration, if I have to do an analysis, I have a good idea of how much time that will take. So I think to myself, I kind of break things down in that order to myself. And I keep, I make lots of notes, makes lots of schedules for myself. But the short answer is it is difficult because outside of all these other things, I have interests. I like to exercise. I like to read. I like to study languages. All these balance things out, right? It's always tough. And as you probably know, you're a family man. Family life suffers sometimes, doesn't it really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Our poor wives.
Do you feel like workaholic?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm a
Okay,
workaholic.
I think that's the answer. You need to reserve a lot of your time into what you're doing. But of course, there's the family, your hobbies, your friends. So
Right.
it's not very easy to balance, right?
No, it's not. When my daughter was young, I made the decision to concentrate my time with her because I knew without a doubt that was going to be much more important than work. So when she was young, as you know, with kids, you have younger kids, I think. How old are your kids now?
2 and 8.
Oh my gosh, they're very young. Certainly until my daughter was in her teenage years, let's say 12, 13, something like that, where she starts to need her father less, right? But so anyways, I dedicated a lot of time during those years. It's an evolution, really. And particularly when there was a lot of studio work in Los Angeles, we would make a plan to go on a trip and we'd have to put trips on hold because all of a sudden a big movie call would come in. And my wife and I realized that you can't sacrifice everything, but you have to take some of the big things when they're there. So your life becomes this sort of floating. It has to be very flexible, very flexible. Now it's different. I've moved to Canada, as I told you. I have my home in Los Angeles, but I also have a home in Canada, in East Canada, in Nova Scotia. My teaching schedule is more flexible. So now I'm able to devote a little more time to the things I want to do. As you point out, I could work with music. Think about music. Music is eternal. And I don't mean it necessarily in this, in a afterlife way, but I mean music is never ending. You never get to the end of music. My love for music will be there until I'm not here.
Okay, let's talk about the evolution of the like recording sessions, orchestrations in Hollywood. You have an extensive experience in Hollywood, working with legendary composers like John Williams, Michael Giacchino, and Jerry Goldsmith. And also you worked in a lot of iconic titles. Our audience can visit your IMDb. They will be impressed. I'm wondering, how has the industry evolved over those years? You observed this period of time, and there are some changes in the industry right now. So how do you feel it?
Well, yes, the industry has changed considerably. And of course, it changed considerably before I even got into it. My first recording session, it was really 1984, come to think of it. It was the movie Cobra, Sylvester Stallone. I never forget that. The first movie that I worked on. I'm not sure of the composer, but I remember it was Stallone. But there was a tremendous amount more of orchestral work in those days. A lot of what we did as recording musicians was television back in those days. All the TV shows, some of which I'm sure your listeners are familiar with. Other ones were TV shows that were popular in the States that probably people don't watch anymore. Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, all these many shows, some forgettable, but they all had orchestras, small orchestras, maybe 25 pieces. We're talking about 8, 6, 6, 4, 3, right? In terms of strings, right? Well, that's about 30 strings, let's say, or maybe something in there. So a small string section, right? A small string section, and maybe single winds, a couple of brass, and a percussionist. Very small. The orchestra for Lost, which was a throwback, because when Lost came out, they weren't doing that many TV shows with live orchestra. Well, the size of the orchestra, just so people have perspective, the size of that orchestra was about 16 violins, 4 violas, so that's 20, 4 cellos, 24, 3 basses, 27 strings, 4 trombones, that's 31, 1 percussionist, 32, piano, 33, and harp, 34. So 34 players, rather small. During those days, we did a lot of television. So there was a lot of recording work. Nowadays, movies that get done are usually done in less time if they're done with live orchestra. Of course, everything is digital with prelays. There's 2 parts of the question. I mean, one part is the recording business has changed considerably for players. But for composers, the challenge really is the balance between, how we balance live orchestra and hybrid scores. That, to me, I think is the big challenge facing composers now.
Okay. Another question to orchestrator Norman. What should be the minimum material that the composer can give to you, like piano sketches, or do you prefer to have more advanced orchestration beforehand?
It really depends, Ferdinand. It depends. Every composers work differently. Composer like, let's say the big composers like Chris Young and Michael Giacchino give me a full orchestral sketch, right? We're talking 50 stave sketch. It's not filled out entirely. We may have 4 notes in the brass that have to be orchestrated or arranged. Many composers will give an orchestrator a piano sketch. For somebody to give you a melody without chords and ask you to harmonize it for them, etc. So, that gets to be more work in a sense, doesn't it? Really, right? But everything is given these days to people, and that's what the modern day orchestrator has to expect. They have to expect something as simple as a lead sheet with very simple chords. Because sometimes the chords may not even work that well, or just a MIDI, and sometimes it's just a MIDI mock-up. Sometimes people give that really, yeah. They send the orchestrator a MIDI mock-up that you must clean up. Sometimes people, even, which I don't particularly like to do, will just send you audio and then you have to take it down. All of that takes more time, and of course, you have to charge people for that.
And do you think an orchestrator should focus on a specific field or a genre, or have a general and extensive knowledge of different genres and fields in terms of orchestration?
The orchestrator has to be it all. The question really, I would see that question more as composer question. Should a composer focus on particular genres? Most people will say no. There are composers who are known as horror composers or sci-fi composers, animation, comedy, family drama, So, but my recommendation for a composer / orchestrator is to try to do all genres. Don't typecast yourself. But if you're talking specifically about somebody who's an orchestrator, then you have to be able to orchestrate in any style that's given to you, right? You have to do your best in any style.
Let's talk about your lecture as you have been actively teaching in some schools like UCLA, in film scoring school. And also you are visiting some cities like Brussels, Madrid, and finally Istanbul this year will be on the pipeline. Yeah. But I'm wondering what motivates you to teach people, because it should be tiring, and you are visiting a lot of cities, and it's in one point it's fun. Okay, you get to know the culture, and you also meet with a lot of people and understand their culture. But on the other hand, it's tiring. So what's the motivation behind it?
I'm a stupid guy. Maybe. Well, I think I enjoy it. I feel the first thing, I still enjoy it, right? I mean, yes, traveling and teaching, I think, combine several hobbies or things in life that I like. I like sharing my knowledge. I do enjoy that. I'm much more than online class, but I really enjoy that, being in a classroom with people and teaching them, sharing knowledge and seeing people come alive with something I'm telling them and having them be appreciative of that. So I love that. And I've always loved traveling. Ever since I was a kid, really. I traveled in my early 20s. As soon as I could travel, I traveled around the States. I always liked to travel. I enjoy that. It combines my love of meeting cultures, etc. But you're right, it does get tiring. It can be repetitive to some degree, right? Right now, the energy component isn't a big deal for me. I don't have any tremendous problems with my energy level, but it's something I'm very lucky to do. I take great pride in being invited different places, like our relationship, for instance. You came to Los Angeles, we met, kept in contact, and then many years later, we reconnected when I was in Bulgaria teaching and arranged a visit to Denizli. And now I'm coming back to go to Istanbul and further the relationship. To me, it's really one of the nice things that I can do is traveling and teaching.
Also, you can combine your extroverted persona with the help of these travels, and also you can mix it with your expertise. And that is really cool thing to do. Okay. And you played double bass, upright bass in over 200 films in Hollywood and films and TV shows. How does your performer background help your approach to orchestration and composing?
Very much. I was very lucky to play music for an orchestra for so many years. And the other thing that I did, without thinking about it, is I played many instruments. I started on bass. Then I played bassoon for several years. And I played trumpet. Then I played alto saxophone. Then I played some clarinet, right? There was a period when I was between 12 and 15. Like in those years, I was playing bassoon. I was just playing bass for jazz. I was playing bassoon in school orchestra. I know I had a teacher. I would bring in different instruments every week to him. and he would sort of show me how they would work, or friends would give me instruments and I would get technical books and things. So the short answer is that all of that experience really helped me understand how the orchestra works
Yeah.
in a way that very, very, very deep. And
Yeah.
I encourage all my students, who most of them do not play an instrument, actually. Most of them don't, except, let's say, a little composer piano, right? Most of them certainly don't play an instrument on a professional level. So I encourage them, even not to be pros on it, but to just to have it, to pick up an instrument, hold a viola, see how it feels, what's happening there, pick up a flute or something. So that experience was invaluable to me.
If you are not playing that instrument, I think it's very valuable to sit with a person who plays this instrument before composing a music with that instrument, because you need to be aware of the scale, the pitches they can go. So you need to know that, I think, to compose in a better way.
No, you're right. And one of the things that is a challenge these days for young composers is that they don't know the live instruments. They work in the DAW, right? We work in the DAW, and the DAW has these wonderful sounds, right? But the DAW can do anything, right? Can produce anything in any register. So young students they don't go to orchestra enough, and they don't sit with the orchestra. They don't play the instruments, so they don't have that experience. When they want to write something realistic, right, for the instruments, they're at a disadvantage. The DAW helps them, but they're still a disadvantage. It's the same thing if I were to say to you, write me a piece for guitar, solo guitar on this, and you've never heard a guitar play live, right? You would be at a disadvantage. Or an oud. I mean, you would write something for oud, right? I would say, I have to watch some videos on what that's about. So what I try to do when I have students, I encourage them to have composers groups when they're in a city. And let's say you have 4 composers, 5 composers. Have a night where you invite a player over to your apartment. Let's say you invite clarinet player over, right? And you say, oh, we'll give you €50 or something like that. We'll give you a little bit of money to come over and just demonstrate your instrument for us for 20 minutes. And have some food and wine, and we're all going to write a piece in 20 minutes. We're going to write a solo clarinet piece, and you can play it for us, and we can talk about what works and what doesn't work. That kind of thing is a lot of fun. It's relatively easy to do. But you're absolutely right. Trying to learn the instruments, making time to talk to players is very valuable.
These are very valuable recommendations for the young composers, actually. How do you find the performance of the virtual instruments, the compositions that the composers create by using the virtual instruments, by using only their setup at their home? Do you think they can create something really cool, or what do you think about it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I hear tremendous things, tremendous mock-ups. The mock-up skills are very good now. From Thailand to Turkey, right? People can mock up very well. Now, on a lot of levels, right? I mean, on let's say on production levels, the cat is out of the bag, which means everybody can do that now. 20 years ago, samples were very expensive. It's still thousands of dollars, admittedly, but even with tens of thousands of dollars. Production levels are very good. But to your point, to take it to the next level, to have it be very spectacular, it is more rare. And that's where the understanding of how the live instruments is vital. That's really my expertise, right? That's really what my thing is. And doing that really takes it to another level when you can combine the orchestra playing. If your game music is orchestral, if you're writing game music that's ambient score, then it doesn't really matter what the heck, it can be sounds mixed with anything, right? Right. But that's where orchestration comes in. That's where real life orchestration, not synthesization so much, not orchestrating just in the DAW, but that's where getting a knowledge of what the real orchestra instruments can do. Now, then you want to change them. You want to modify them, tweak them, and you want to do all sorts of wild and wacky things to it. That's great, but you still should have an understanding of how the instruments work in their range, how they produce sounds, and what's difficult to do and what's not difficult to do, and which ones to blend together.
You've been into numerous recording sessions, and I think you have some behind-the-scenes stories. Is there something you want to share with our audience? Maybe fun, challenging, or some kind of memories?
Well, I remember something that was pretty funny. One of the early jobs I did, I don't remember what it was, a TV show, doesn't remember the name, but there's a very famous pianist. Her name was Zita Carno. She was pianist for the LA Philharmonic, right? As a session player, she also played, with the orchestra. And we were doing something where she had to do prepared piano. She decided to put her keys inside the piano, but then her keys fell underneath the strings. We had to stop the session and call a piano tuner in, right? To take this piano apart. And it must have taken an hour. I remember the contractor, her name was Patty Zamidi, and she was a very nice woman. I remember Patty just laughing, saying, "This is costing tens of thousands of dollars to get Zita's keys." During that time, money was so abundant, really. We did so many sessions that spending $10,000 keeping a whole orchestra sitting there wasn't unusual. But I'll tell you another story as I think about things, about how you can't make mistakes. I remember I was working, there's a very famous orchestrator named Jeremy Lubbock. You might not have heard of him, but if anybody's interested, you can find Jeremy Lubbock, Lubbock, on iTunes and Spotify. He was an orchestrator and arranger, mostly vocal charts and things. British guy, passed away now. Very, very good. He came from jazz background, but he also incorporated modern classical stuff. But he did stuff for Barbara and Michael Jackson, top list people. I remember we were doing a recording session. I think it was for Barbara Streisand, right? And it was pretty big string section. I wasn't playing first bass. Eventually I played first. You know what first means, right? It's the principle. So the first bass player, we do a take, right? And the first bass player makes a mistake. Jeremy goes into the booth. He comes out of the booth. He looks over to the bass section. "Everything okay there, boys? Everything okay now?" And this bass player goes, "Yes." Right? We do it again. The bass player makes the same mistake in the same place. And that was the last time that guy ever worked for him. Right? That's just, you really don't want to do that. You really don't. Yeah.
In the end, you're a human being and you can make some mistakes, but if that's a very crucial moment, so
you don't want to make the same mistake twice. Okay? Things happen. Things happen. I mean, you're right. We're human. Coming in wrong or something like that, not counting correctly, right, can happen one time. But anyways, I don't know. So many different stories. The thing that I think is important for people to remember and think about is that we always have the directors come to the recording sessions. We're talking J.J. Abrams, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, whoever you want to think of. They come to the recording sessions, and they are just enamored. They're just so in awe of what we do, the musicians, because it's magic to them, right? They're not musicians, they're not professional musicians. They can't believe how the first reading sounds perfect to them, or these complex, amazing, difficult John Williams scores that studio players will read it basically perfectly in the first take to their ears. Now, to professional ears, it may need some changes. So they love coming to that. And that was always a really nice moment, because they would come and then they would always come out into the room and say some things. J.J. Abrams, who also is a bit of a musician, one of his quotes was saying how the musicians give the humanity to his movie. I think what he means is that movies are like a two-dimensional construct, aren't they, really, right? But the addition of orchestral music or live playing. It could even be a singer. I mean, it doesn't have to be orchestral music, but the addition of music that's not necessarily electronic music, but addition of acoustic music in some way, played by players, gives the listener, us as humans, a feeling of connection. The sound, it's something wired into us. That's always been a good memory to me. I remember the first orchestration that I did. It was Super 8, the movie Super 8. I don't know if you ever saw that one, but it was, about young kids and they take a movie and they see a monster, right? That was co-produced by Steven Spielberg, that movie, right? This first movie that I orchestrated on, the head orchestrator, the man named Tim, was a big jokester, like as I am, right? Likes to tease people. So the more we did, it was a double session. So in the morning, 10 to 1, right? My orchestrations weren't played. And then I'm already nervous as well, right? You know, I'm nervous because I'm playing bass, right? So then we have lunch, right? And then we come back from lunch and I see Tim in the hallway and he goes, Norman, Michael saw your orchestrations and we're not going to play them. They're crap. You know? It was just so funny because it's just the way we talk to each other. But that first day was really nice for me because I was surrounded by my friends. And that's one of the things I loved is that because I was a bass player, I'm also playing in the session, which is rare. Most orchestrators aren't players, really. But since I was playing my orchestration and all my friends, you could see my names on there and very supportive. Yeah. I enjoyed it.
Cool moments. One last question. What do you see as the main advantages of pursuing a formal education? This is kind of a question to people who are willing to study music. Do you think that formal education helps them a lot building careers in music?
I do, Feridun. I'm partial to education. As I told you, heck, I got a doctorate. So I like being in school and I like teaching in school. I do think that there is a lot of advantage to getting a formalized kind of education, right? They're like players. There's some players who are so natural. They don't have, basically don't have any lessons. They pick up French horn and they play it like magic. For me, I think composition, film composition, media composition, orchestration, whatever we're going to call it, mixing, production. There are so many schools these days that I think it really helps a individual. It gives them confidence. It gives them structure. It gives them contacts, right? Not just professors, but the friends you meet in the program will become your colleagues, right? Yeah. So I think investment that one does in going to an online class, right? Let's say online program or a school someplace is really worth it as opposed to just being in your house, writing your own music in your own kind of world, thinking that you're going to connect with the jobs that you want and the career that you want. So yes, I do think there's an advantage to that.
Okay, I'm done with the questions. So is there anything you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I just want to say to Secular, to you for putting this together. And I enjoyed it very much. And I hope that your listeners also appreciated it. And I hope their careers go well. And I look forward to doing it another time with you.
Thank you so much for your time and the valuable information that you've shared with all our audience.
My pleasure. Te Secular. Ciao.
Ciao.